Okay. So I think Wendy's on.
Okay, so how did it feel to finally pass the PMP? Who wants to go?
Woo! I got a lot to say. Not really a lot to say, except don't do what I did, y'all. So, well, first of all, I scheduled mine because I'm a morning person
Mhm.
for 8 o'clock in the morning. And that was perfect. So I got there like uh 6 o'clock in the morning before they even opened the building. By the way, I had also visited the testing center. That was huge for me.
Mm.
Just visualizing the testing center, and I'm a big affirmations person. So I was like feeling, really confident until the day of, right? So the day of I got nervous. Like I was had so much excitement
Mhm.
that I made myself nervous and decided to drink coffee on top of already being nervous,
Oh my
right?
No.
God.
So you got to know and I knew that was a bad idea, but I was just like, just in case, I'm feeling sluggish because it's early, whatever. I'm a morning person, but I just I started overthinking.
Mhm.
So I drank this coffee and got in there. I was feeling good. Everybody was nice and took my picture, whatever we had to do to get in and get situated. And I sat down to take my test and I froze for the first 10 questions.
Oh,
Ugh.
yeah.
Y'all, that is because I wasn't concerned about the money, right? Paying
Mhm.
the test and all that other stuff but it was just like it felt like the hardest part of the test came first for me. So I froze for like the first, I would say 15 questions. And all I could do was just keep reading the questions over and over.
Wow. Yeah.
And what made it even worse was that by the time my first set of questions was done, I was so far behind that I had my little break and I was just mentally trying to figure out how am I going to do this? Because I had already, Wendy and Corey, we had already kind of figured out what the numbers are and where you should be after the first set and all this good stuff.
Yeah. You mean the minutes, right? The minutes in the
Yeah, where
question.
should the
Yeah.
timing, how many minutes should you have left after that first set? And
That's important.
I was not near what I had planned. So I had to double time it the second set. And I will say to my relief, I got a little relief because it did get easier.
Mhm.
But by the end of the exam, I was answering questions right up to the second. I think I might have had a minute left. And I still don't even know how I had a minute left because anyway. So I didn't feel good after the exam was over.
Mhm.
All I could say to myself is, I think I passed. I think I passed. I think I passed. And I walked out, got my paper. I didn't even look at it. I just folded it up. I went to the bathroom and cried because I didn't even know if I passed. I was just like, what was that? Like in my head, I was like, girl, what was that? I'm literally in the stall, in the bathroom crying
Oh.
because I didn't know for sure. And I was just like, oh, that just didn't feel like my best.
Mhm.
And I said, you know what? It is what it is. These people can't see me crying. I
Mhm.
had my shades, my sunglasses. The memories are flooding back now. I had my sunglasses, and I was like, you know what? I'm gonna wipe my eyes, put my shades on, and read this paper. If anybody sees me walking out the bathroom, they won't be able to tell
Mhm.
that I've been crying. So I looked at the paper and it said pass, and I almost fell to the floor, y'all. I,
Wow. Yeah.
and so yeah, long story short, I ran to the van, called my husband, and I was just venting. Thank goodness for my husband. But
Yeah.
um, but yeah, I felt so much better after talking to him, and I just big relief. That's all I can say.
Yeah.
Is um,
I know the feeling.
if you freeze like I did, don't stop.
Hmm. That's a good
Just
point.
just trust me because you might get the hardest part of the exam at first. And
Yeah.
don't, obviously get yourself all worked up like I did with the caffeine and whatever. But yeah, relief. That's all I can say.
Yeah. I think relief is good to segue to how I felt. Relief is for sure. We know it was 180 questions and they were all multiple choice. And so that makes life a little easier when you know you're dealing with multiple choice, but does it
Mhm.
really? Because they weren't easy questions, they threw a lot of curveballs, the red herrings in there. So you have to really know the methodology of PMI, like Wendy said earlier. They have a certain way that they think and they want you to think. And so, you don't approach the answers to the questions like you would, because you do this every day. Everybody's different. So that's kind of we study according to that kind of mindset. And so it was a challenge going through the test, trying to, decipher between how PMI wants you to think and how I would handle it as a project manager. So by the time I got, through the test, uh, there were some things that were just, oh, I know that one. That's easy. We studied that one. Oh, I remember seeing that one on Study Guide, on Study Hall. Or I remember I saw a question like this on YouTube that I was watching YouTube videos on questions and answers. So there were some things that came to mind, but I honestly tell you, like Fia said, by the end of it, I didn't know if I passed. I really did. It was like, oh, I felt bad because not like Fia, I didn't have uh, a few minutes left or a minute left. I literally finished the test at the very second that it was over. And by the time I looked at the clock, a bunch of them I had to breeze through. Like it was a mess. By that time I did not think that I could have passed that exam. And so in terms of my feeling afterwards, I felt so relieved because as Fia said, I did not want to take this thing again. I just didn't want to because that would mean, I put all of the effort into it. And I was, we were all just really committed. So I got to say, though, if we hadn't done what we did, meeting together in a study group, I honestly can say I don't think I would have passed it. I don't think I would have had that in myself to have
Same
that
here.
kind of drive to get to the end like that. So I'll turn it over to you, Wendy.
Yeah, I agree with you 100%. The study group definitely helped elevate me in terms of my studying habits. But the same, very similar to what Corey and Fia mentioned. I was super nervous going into the exam. My exam was actually scheduled like mid-morning, so I think I was around like 10 o'clock in the morning, and I remember getting up that morning, and I was studying till the very end. I took like a practice exam the day before, and then that morning I was just doing like questions. I was super nervous going in. And when I got in and actually started taking the exam, I sort of had the reverse of what Fia experienced in that first set of questions that I had were the easy questions. So I felt like I breezed through that first section with limited issues. And I had my more difficult block for the very, very end. So I remember that last section that I got to, I was very nervous because I had marked some questions that I wanted to go back to and review. And so then I was worried, am I going to have enough time? My heart was pumping. And I probably finished with, I don't know, maybe a minute or two left. It wasn't a whole lot of time.
Mhm.
And I got the piece of paper and didn't look at it until I got to the parking lot. And then I had an experience very similar to Fia's in that I
Mhm.
looked at it and it said I passed. And then I started crying like, oh my God, I can't believe, because I didn't feel super confident coming out of it either, because you really just don't know. And then
Yeah.
I believe that PMI, there's a certain number of questions that they put in the pool as samples.
Yeah, some of them don't
Um,
count.
right. So you
Mhm.
don't know whether or not, like if you answered a question that was very, very difficult, whether or not that was one that counted or whether or not that was one of the sample questions.
Right.
So yeah, it was a very stressful experience for me. and I wouldn't consider myself like a good test taker, but I knew I had put in a whole lot of time and effort. And like Corey, I didn't want to have to take the exam again if I could avoid it.
Well, you guys said you both cried when you got it.
Yeah, yeah.
Um, I might have shed a tear. I'm just saying, I might a little
It,
tear might have
ain't
came
no
out.
shame, ain't no shame, ain't no shame.
Tear
But
might have
you
came
know
out. I'm just
what?
saying.
You know what? I don't care how much you prepare.
Yeah, that was hard.
You are
I,
not the emotional part of it.
yeah,
You really can't. I mean, I was up at 3 a.m. a lot, like taking exams, trying to mimic the situation that would be
mhm,
at the test center, and
yeah,
I didn't have nothing near the emotions that I had on the day of. So
Mhm.
just just hold tight when you get there. Like you've prepared, but there's gonna be this extra thing that
yeah,
comes, and you got to be prepared to say everything's fine, keep
yeah,
going.
yeah. Keep
Everything's
going.
fine, keep going.
Yeah, and I gotta can't stress enough. Time management is important, right?
Mhm.
Literally
Yes.
managing the clock. Maybe in future episodes we can dive into deeper with some numbers and where you should be halfway through because you get a break in between. But where you should be at the break. What number how many minutes you should be per question. That was key because actually literally wrote it down and I said to myself, oh boy, I'm behind looking at the numbers. So let me step it up. So like I said, I finished at the very second. So if you imagine, if I hadn't managed the time, there would have been quite a few questions I may not have gotten to. So
Mm.
Yeah.
again, that was
Yeah.
emphasized in our study group. We talked about that at length.
Mhm.
hmm
Yeah.
And that whole I'm gonna write something down so I can remember.
Yeah, right. That brain
Oh,
dumping thing.
on the scratch pad
I
that
did
they
not do
Yes.
no scrap, y'all. I
Yeah.
I did not have time. Like I was too
Yeah.
nervous.
That took away some
I
time. I
needed
did
all
that.
my time. What'd you say?
I did it, but I don't know if that really helped me at all. Because
Yeah, I needed my time, and I'm
did
glad
you?
I did.
How about you, Wendy? You use that brain dump?
I didn't use the scratch pad at all. I don't think. Yeah.
The only thing I used it for was writing down how many minutes I had left, like so
Mm,
that I could visually see myself doing it.
hmm.
Right, right. Yeah, that was good. That was what I wrote down too. I did try it, but didn't help me at all.
Wendy, you were gonna say something else?
Yeah, no. I didn't use it and I was prepared to use it, but when I got in there and I sat down, and like that clock starts and you're just like, let me just start answering questions. So
Yeah.
Mhm.
I didn't want to take away from the exam time with trying to rehash everything that was in my head. And
Mhm.
that ended up being a good choice for me. So I'm glad I didn't, waste time writing a bunch of stuff down.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Absolutely.
Can I
So
say this
oh,
too?
go ahead.
So there's a bit of a hack that I learned, and I use this to my advantage. So when you first sit down, they give you about 5 minutes of
Mhm.
instruction and you have your scratch pad in front of you. When you're sitting down at the computer, you can choose to use that time to read the 5 minutes of test instructions, or you could use it to, let me say, do the instructions and do your brain dump at the same time.
Yeah.
So that
Yeah.
does save you a few minutes. So if you're like me, where you're struggling with time, that might be a good opportunity if you decide to kind of read it or not brain dump, but you do have a few minutes before that.
Yeah, that's a really good point. Like I didn't do the brain dump during that time either. I used it for deep breathing and
Mm,
saying my affirmations
yeah.
because yeah,
Can I
I
tell
need
you?
to calm myself down. So I use that time to calm down.
So
As
the
much
deep
as I could.
breathing thing, I was doing that too, but I was doing the deep breathing thing a little too loud
I
because
thought I was too. We got to move on to the next question. But
yeah,
let
yeah,
me say, I literally was reading the questions out loud, y'all.
yeah,
I was
Yeah.
whispering, but it was getting to the point where I thought they were gonna come and say something. They never did. They never
Oh.
did. I thought I was too loud.
No, I was. They tapped me.
Like that's the only way I could get through each question fast is to say it with my lips and let
Right.
my brain catch it at the same time.
Yeah.
And it worked. It worked. So,
Yeah.
oof, we could go on and on for that
Yeah.
last question.
Yeah.
How did
Yeah.
it feel to finally pass? Yeah, we could do another video on that.
Yeah, that's
So
right.
we now a year later, 2025, April 4th. Who wants to go first?